So here's the opening slide. And you can see that the purpose of this is to try to focus on the post-high school situation. We're not going to really address much unless Monica wants to speak to it about the staying in school till 21 aspect. You can though, Monica, if you want to touch on that. We're talking about all of the kids that may or may not or might possibly have some involvement with post-secondary after high school. The interesting thing, the most important thing, is that a lot of people have RESPs from when they're children, when the kids are children. They might have one for each child. They accumulate money in the RESP because there's a reasonable government grant. You put in $2,500 a year, get a $500 grant, which can't turn it down. But what's happened is Greg has referred people to me on a number of occasions because he works with families and they may have several children, 1, 2, 3 kids, one of whom has special needs. And the question comes up at a certain point, what should we do with this RESP? It doesn't appear to us that he's going to go on to post-secondary. Should we just collapse it and put the money into an RDSP? Well, no, you shouldn't, and I'll get into that. But we wanted to show the flexibility of RESPs for families who would like to make use of them, especially when the child finishes high school, because if they don't stay in school until they're 21, you have the post-21 problem. Now what? Right? What do you do now? And is that, watching TV and playing video games the best thing for your child? Well, no, it's not, although it may be distracting. So that's what sparked us to do this. And so we want to talk about RESPs, RDSPs, and OSAP, and then special bursaries and accommodations that can be made. Karen will speak to that on slide 12. So that's the initial part. We have 151 registered attending. So I'd like to give us all some context. And the reason I'm speaking so quickly is that I'm trying to get through this in reasonably short order so everybody can go and have a cup of tea and watch the TV or go to bed. So just one small thing. We now have a caregiver benefit. If you have a child who would be attending a program of some sort, but can't because of COVID, or you have an elderly parent, or you have a child under 12, then you could apply. If you worked and earned up to $5,000 in either 2020 or 2019, then you could apply for, as of September 27th, the Canada Caregiver benefit. And as a result, if you're unable to work because you have to care for someone under 12 and who's home from school because they have a COVID issue in their classroom, or you have an elderly parent or someone who's threatened by COVID, or you have a child with special needs who was either over 12 but still an adult perhaps, but they can't go to programs, or support workers can't come to them, for example. We're largely, I think, past the PSWs coming to homes. As far as I know, they're now coming to the homes again, but there's still lots of programs that are, they used to be all week and now they're down to one day. So this is a caregiver benefit that could be available to you. We did a session on this some time back, but I just thought I'd raise that first so everyone's aware of it. To provide some context, you can see here that 1 family in 10 is the parent household of a person with special needs. If you look at these numbers, and if you take the population of Ontario as 13.7, and if you go by what StatsCan says, and that is divide the number of people by 3, this gives you the estimated number of households, 4,566,000 approximately. So the chart on the right here shows that if you add all these up, all these numbers here, you get 378,802 that are on ODSP. Now this number is only people from age 18 to 65. It doesn't include under 18 or over 65, and that's about another third. So it's approximately, let's say to be conservative, let's say it's 100,000 kids under 18 or seniors over 65. So now you're at 478,000. Well, 10% of 4,566,000 is 456. It's pretty simple math, right? So if you're at 478, that is more than one household in 10 that is the parent household. And if you want to be really conservative, you could say or sibling household, so that when the parent is gone, the sibling that is the trustee of the Henson Trust is the household that is concerned specifically about that child. The child is over 65, the parent is deceased, but now the brother is the trustee. So it's that kind of calculation. 1 in 10. Now the interesting thing is that I don't think a lot of people know this number, and it's a substantial number. This is the breakdown of the types of disabilities that people have. These are all ODSP statistics, by the way. So you can see here that on the mental health issue side of it, it's 20%. Developmental disabilities are 19%. This is a point where you might wonder whether they might attend post-secondary. I don't see a category for autism. I'm going to check with the head statistician and see if we can get a breakout based on autism, because I'm quite sure it's in their statistics. They just don't graph it. You can see certain physical diseases. Well, that wouldn't be so much an issue for post-secondary, perhaps, although it would affect your physical constitution. It might affect your concentration. So these others aren't quite the same, but you can see that the neuroses and depression and schizophrenia would often affect the stress levels of the child, and they might be able to handle perhaps 2 or 3 courses a semester, but not 5. So it would take them longer if they're able to do it. You know, things like schizophrenia don't make you stupid. It's just an illness that takes over your brain, your whole database, and makes you ill. This just happens to be the number of people on ODSP in all these different communities, plus the people that are in their household as a family unit. These numbers, ACSD, they're a modest indication, because what that is assistance for children with severe disabilities, and it's by no means inclusive, because really it's based upon household income. It's not based upon severe disability. It's based upon a household income of less than 45 grand. So you can see it's a small number. But if you look at Ottawa, where did Ottawa go? You'd think I'd have this by heart. Here we are. So there's Ottawa. Ottawa has a population of 1 million. If you divide that by 3, that's 333,000, let's say. So you have 26,000 people on ODSP. That's pretty close to 33,000. There's 35,000 in the benefit unit, plus another 2,000 ACSD. So you can see that, you know, this doesn't count all the kids under 18 or the people over 65. So you can easily see that if there's 333,000 households, that there's easily 33,000 households affected by different special needs with kids with ODSP. Here we get to RESPs, and you know, Greg, chime in anytime you want. You can see here that I think, as most of everyone here knows, if you set up an RESP and you put $2,500 a year in, then the government puts in a grant of 20%, so $500. The income grows without taxation. It can be held for a total of 35 years. Presuming one starts this when a child is young and you don't even have a diagnosis of autism. then you can have it for 35 years. There's no big rush. And at the end of it, if you decide not to use the RESP, in lots of cases you can use it by another sibling, or if you thought it was the best and it isn't, you could transfer it, you could roll it into an RDSP, the kids' RDSP, if they qualify for the disability tax credit, or your RSP. But neither of those is probably the smart thing to do, because if you roll it into the RDSP, it's a one-time lump sum contribution, when what you want to do is make annual contributions of $1,500 to get the $4,500 of grants and bonds. So you wouldn't plunk 30 grand into it right away. You would set it aside and make 1,500 contributions over 20 years, right? And similarly with the RESP, well, yeah, you could do that. You could put that into your RRSP, but the return of capital is not taxable. The grants are gone if what you've done is collapsed it. So that leaves the growth section. Well, yeah, it's true. You could fill out paperwork and you could roll it into your RRSP. But similarly, you could just take it and have it come into your hands as income and then contribute what you want of it into your RRSP if you have room, contribution room, which of course most people do. But that again wouldn't necessarily be the right thing. Extended educational benefits. Well, I think that Monica will get into that. This flexibility factor, this is an important thing, because people think, oh, well, they have to get into some degree granting program. Well, in fact, it's very, 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 very flexible. You can go to all these different places for what is called post-secondary. And Greg confirmed today, oops, sorry about that. Greg confirmed today that the course requirements are in fact only 10 hours per week for 3 consecutive weeks. Now, obviously that's not full course load. Greg, did you want to make any comment about any of these things?
Sure, Ken. Nice to tie in with this and all the folks. I've been working with RESPs for over 25 years. And for most people, the idea of saving money for their kids so they can do something after grade 12, of course, makes sense. Where it gets tricky is when they set up a plan for a baby or a pretty young child, maybe they're 1 year old, and then a few years later, they get a diagnosis. And that's always an interesting conversation, because people ask me, what happens if my child doesn't go to school? But it's a bigger question than that, because it's not just what if they don't go to university or college, it's are they likely to go to school at all? Are they likely to go to elementary school? Are they likely to go to high school? So these are all on a case-by-case basis. But the main thing you have to look at is if there's a chance, maybe a good chance, or maybe just a reasonable chance that the child is going to study something through high school and on. Because if a child can attend high school, basically they can attend post-secondary, because when I was a young person, we used to have grade 13 in Ontario. We don't have grade 13 anymore, so you start at a college or a university. And as Ken mentioned, you can use an RESP to study almost anything that you can think of that gets you a certification or a diploma or a degree. A lot of kids use RESPs who are not scholars. Some of the kids, they just don't like school, but they want to do something and they have skills. So a lot of kids with various disabilities, of course, get educations. A lot of them are working. And it's always interesting when you're dealing with a child, how far are they going to go? And in most cases, we don't know. I was thinking of one of my friends and clients whose name is Don, and another's who's Carl. And, you know, the same kind of thing when the kids were around 10 or 12, it wasn't looking so good. But as they finished high school, it was looking a lot better. And they always ask me, well, what if they don't go? And the worst case scenario is if the child doesn't go to school, you don't lose your money, you don't lose your interest. The government takes the government grant back, but you even have the income on the government money. So the worst case scenario is still a pretty good situation. So should you look into an RESP? If you can answer the question, do you think there's a chance that the child is going to go on to high school? And if the answer is yes, I think they're going to go to high school and, you know, continue on at that level, then they would certainly be capable of doing something post high school at different levels. And it makes sense to look at an RESP, because if it doesn't pan out for that child, you don't take a loss anyway. You don't do as well as if they did go to school, but it still turns out to be a good investment. So Ken, those are the biggest questions that people have. And I think that sort of wraps up what I wanted to say for now.
That's a fair comment. Monica, did you want to jump onto this, or shall we just carry on?
Yeah, just one comment. So if the children are in secondary school and they have disabilities, it all depends on whether they are following credit-bearing courses or non-credit-bearing courses. If they're not in a credit-bearing stream, either the applied or the academic stream, they would not be able to go on to college or university unless it was a specialized program where they could just audit it. For example, Algonquin College in Ottawa has the opportunity for students with disabilities to audit a course, which means to attend and participate, but they do not earn a diploma with that. So it's an equal opportunity for them, but not with the same results. So I just wanted to clarify that it really depends on what stream they are in. And one of the major things that I am doing right now is helping families where students who are in specialized classes, so special education classes in grades 7 and 8, or have been through elementary, to transition them into credit-bearing course pathways if the child is able to, based on cognitive assessments and educational assessments, because we don't want to shut those doors for them. It's easier for them to transition back into a non-credit course or a locally developed course, which still gives them credits. So there's 3 streams for them to earn credits. So we really aim to get our students with special needs into a credit-bearing stream so that they can pursue something post-secondary.
That's great, thanks. I'm just going to answer one question here. If someone on ODSP is a subscriber and beneficiary of an RESP, is this amount counted as part of the asset test, $40,000 for ODSP, that is? No, it's not. And the rationale is that if it happens to belong to a parent on behalf of a child who's on ODSP, well, it's their asset. So that's that. And besides that, if it was a situation where there was a grandparent, a child who was a mother who's on ODSP, and a child who is part of the benefit unit, but doesn't have any of the disabilities of the mother could have an RESP for their child, the grandchild, in her name, up to 50,000, which is the maximum, and it's an exempt asset for ODSP. This slide shows you the 2 alternatives here. This is part of what Greg spoke to, and choice 1 is the child does go to a post-secondary program of some sort, and so it just proceeds as it would with anyone. You get your capital back, and then you get the income, the government grants, and the income on the government grants. So that's that's just normal. And then the second choice is you decide that you have to withdraw the money. Well, of course, the parent that owns this, the return of the capital is just a return of their money. And then there's the income on that, on the principal and grants. And that could be or would be income to you. And then you could roll it into an RRSP or RDSP. There's paperwork involved. you know, if you want to do that paperwork, great, but I wouldn't recommend that you roll it into an RDSP for sure, because what you want to do is you want to make annual contributions of $1,500, so you get the grants and bonds of $4,500. If you were to roll 30 grand into the RDSP, that's a waste of money in a sense. Now, it's, of course, this is everybody's own judgment and decision, right? But I don't think it's an optimum use. And then as far as putting the growth portion into an RRSP, well, if you have room, sure, what the heck. But if you receive it back in a potentially taxable form, nothing to stop you contributing it, making an equal contribution, and then you get a credit. So it depends on what you think is the simplest to do. Let's see where we go here. Now, this is just a brief piece about RDSPs for anybody who doesn't happen to already know. If a child is approved for the disability tax credit, they can have an RDSP. I would think perhaps a third, perhaps a half of the people on ODSP, children, people that have disabilities, might be qualified to have a disability tax credit. We spend a great deal of our time getting people approved for this or reapproved for this, partly for the tax credits for the parents. As a child under 18, the disability tax credit saves the parent $2,200 a year, plus they get the Canada Disability Child Benefit, which is on a low income situation, it's a maximum of $2,400 a year. And in lots of cases, we can do this retroactively for a 10-year period because the child wasn't approved or parents didn't know about it. So the recapture for the parents could be $22,000 or $16,000 if the child is over 18. And it's certainly worth doing. Plus, this helps fund the RDSP because the disability tax credit transferred from an adult saves you $1,600 a year. And what you need is $1,500 a year to contribute for the optimum contribution. If there's questions about that, please let me know. I see your points here that you're making, Mark. This is an interesting thing. If you set up an RDSP and you wait till the child's 18, so that the RDSP grants and bonds are based upon the child's income, the ODSP, which is, you know, at max 14,000, then they will get the maximum grants and bonds. And you can see here that if they're born in 2000, they were approved at age 6 when they were diagnosed with autism, you contribute $1,500. When they are 20, let's just say, and you do that every year, and you invest it at 5%, here's what you get at age 60 for them. So it's truly phenomenal. And this is a simple calculation of if you made that accumulation, you can see it up here, right? If you made that accumulation, the formula at age 60 would give them $30,000 a year for 23 years. And this is one of the reasons that we always do sort of an audit. I want to see the statement. I want to see the RDSP statement, because too often when they're placed or with a bank, people are blown away by the grants and bonds. They don't get any kind of investment advice, because of course it's to the bank's advantage if you get really literally nothing, because they're going to lend it down at a higher rate. And I've had situations, and this isn't unusual, where a mother had set it up in 2008, December 2008, and she had contributed every year until I looked at the statement, say 2 years ago. And since inception, it had earned 0.5%. That's 10 years of nothing, with inflation at 2 points. And I remember seeing one that had $42,000 in it, which was below the maximum that it should have had with contributions, grants, and bonds and all that. but that's not unusual. But it had $42,000. And in the first 6 months of the year, it had earned $4.26. So when I reviewed the statement, I could easily see that it had been placed into a money market fund. So it was placed with someone who had the ability to invest it, because a money market fund is basically cash ready to be invested, but it was never deployed. So 42 grand, 426 in 6 months. This is abysmal. So I always try to have people make sure that they get proper financial advice. And if they don't think they can get it from a bank, that they shift it to a financial advisor of some sort. It doesn't matter where they are, but somebody that will advise them. And it's then placed with either Investors Group or through Edward Jones with Mackenzie Financial, or through your insurance agent with Sun Life with Mackenzie. You know, anything is better than nothing. But that said, you can't turn down 700 grand. This is the formula for the payout of the RDSPs if you decide that you're going to take the RESP money and start to contribute it. And then it's a question of, well, when can this money come out? And basically, simplest thing is this calculation right here, where you wait to age 60, and it pays out over a 23-year period. But prior to age 59, you can take money out if the government grants exceed what you've contributed. And of course, over 20 years, you contribute 30,000 and they put in 90. So you'd have to put in more than 90 to otherwise not to be able to take money out without losing grants and bonds. So you can't in practice do that unless you have a situation where the child is likely to die within 5 years or less. We're working on one of those right now, and it was overfunded. You can contribute up to 200,000 by the family. That's aside from the grants and bonds, 200,000. So 30,000 for the annual 1,500 times 20, and then up to another 170. And in this case, that's what Dad did. And now it's in fact grown. He was an astute investor. The child is 55, and it's 300,000. Now these have only been in place since 2010, and it could only be contributed until he was 49. That's 6 years ago. So you can see that it was overfunded and well invested, and it's already 300,000. But unfortunately, he has developed dementia, and he lived with his dad up until recently, who's in his mid-90s. But now he's with a brother for 3 years, but now the brother can't handle him because his care needs are such that he has dementia and can't provide the level of support. So they want to put him into a supported situation, a residence, much as you would for a much older person with dementia. And they want to draw the money out of the RDSP in order to fund it, because they need about $3,500 a month on top of his ODSP to pay for it. So it's a very interesting thing, but a timely thing, because until 10 years had elapsed, none of the grants and bonds had vested. We only have a couple now that are vested, a couple of years that are vested now. But we're getting to the point where people are asking, well, how can I make use of this money? Now here's slide 12. This is the OSAP program. And I wanted to see if Monica, and in particular Karen, could speak to this for the OSAP student assistance. And it may well be, as Karen will point out to you, that the child, based upon household income, might get a very small amount of OSAP grants and loans. But if they have other special needs, they get accommodations and they can receive special benefits. Karen, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk as a parent that has a child with a disability. It was first brought to my attention that there was any bursaries for OSAP. I think it was halfway through my daughter's first year post-secondary. That's when I found out that even if you might not get OSAP, you still apply and allow you to get the grants and bonds. But it's very important, in order to get the disability grant, is to have that checked off, student with disability. You will also need to have your doctor fill out forms, and at that point, OSAP will deem whether you get the grant or not. This year it's been very helpful to get kids through post-secondary. Also with that comes with CAL program at Algonquin or Paul Menton at Carleton. I'm sure every school has them. Is they allow you to get special help. This year was really important to have lectures recorded for them. So there were so many programs that opened up once I got this certificate through OSAP. While that said, I also had to make sure that I had power of attorneys for my son because he did need some help, but because he's over 18, I was kind of at a wall. I'm sure Ken's heard me complain lots about it, that I came to a wall. And once I got that power of attorney, everything started to run smoothly. My son was getting the help that he needed. There's help for tutoring. There's a cost with it, but it's a little bit more of a discounted cost. So I think it's really important that even if you're not going to get OSAP or you don't think you're going to get OSAP, to apply to maximize the grants and bonds that come with, not the bursaries and not grants and bonds, the bursaries that can come with this.
What about accommodations in colleges or university? What kind of hurdles you have to get over to get accommodations?
Oh, I went through, well, you watched it some days. I went through firing hoops to get the accommodations, but once it was set up, it was great. He has extra time for homework. He can also, instead of taking 5 classes, he can now take 4 classes or 3 classes. I think it's 60% of the program, which is a great help, especially with kids online right now. It's difficult for, anybody to be 7-8 hours on Zoom. So to have that was very helpful. There was, trying to think of all the little things that we had. The one main thing was recording, the extra time for homework and assignments. And the other thing, there's tutoring that they can have. I guess it's older children that do it to help, but instead of paying like $30, $40, you pay the student like $8. And some of that comes out of the grants that we got.
Oh, that's good.
Help. Yeah.
That's a good deal.
But I can't stress for any parent, get the power of attorney if you can, because it makes your life so much easier to help your child set this up.
Yeah, because now they're adults, right?
That's right. They're 18. You can't do much,
Yeah. Monica, did you want to comment on any of that part of it?
Yeah, so the important thing and the hurdles that I help my clients with, and I have more and more clients at the post-secondary level, is particularly that, first of all, not everyone who works at the student accessibility centers for those institutions are trained in or have any disability training or accessibility training. And so I want to mention a very important policy from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which came out in 2018, which is accessible education for students with disabilities, because that highlights a number of the obstacles that students have faced. My favorite one is that the institutions will say, well, we can't give you that accommodation because it's not on our drop-down list, or it's not listed in your psychological assessment report. Well, psychologists can't list all of the accommodations because those may change given the nature of the program or the course that the student is taking. So the Ontario Human Rights Commission policy underlines the importance of meeting the students based on their needs, not based on a diagnosis or a professional report. So it's very important that the students explain what accommodations they need. I'll give you an example. I had a student who was a music performance student at Carleton, and she required accommodations so that she could have an accompanist. Well, when her accompanist fell through, in order to do her exam, they said that she had to go ahead and do her exam anyway. And so she had to scramble and find an accompanist at the last minute who didn't learn her pieces properly. So evidently she didn't perform well. So we had to retroactively ask for an accommodation, and these can occur even after the course is finished, so that a grade appeal can happen if you can demonstrate that an accommodation was not provided. And many times students with ADHD have organizational difficulties and forget to register prior to an exam that they require accommodations for that exam, and then they're not given them. So there are still some obstacles, and every scenario is different. But one of the things I want to underline is that institutions must meet the students' accommodations based on their needs as they express them. So it's not a one size fits all or a drop down menu. And so they need to push back on that. And that's something that I can help with.
We have a question here about powers of attorney. We do these all the time. It's sort of a courtesy thing. May you please clarify about the power of attorney? Does the child get it? What it is just like anyone here, anyone taking part who goes and has their will done and does the power of attorney to appoint their wife as their power of attorney, and the spouse is the alternate, is the executor of their will, and then there's an alternate executor and so on. Well, normally as a part of that standard package, a will and a power of attorney, you sign these documents, a power of attorney for property and a power of attorney for personal care, that appoints someone to assist you. And it doesn't take anything away from you. It's just that, well, competent, if you are competent, and this is the factor for the child, but of course, if they're going to go to post-secondary, they're probably almost certainly competent to sign powers of attorney. Because they turn 18, they're an adult. So there's all sorts of privacy legislation, most strongly seen in the medical sector, but it's the same in schools, hospitals, universities, where once they become an adult, unless they sign a consent form for each institution or doctor or whatever that you're going to deal with, they can't tell you anything. And there's a lot of cases where they don't want to tell you anything. If they tell you something, you're just going to stick your nose into it, right? And they know what's best, so why would they want to tell you? Right? The fact that you're their mother doesn't make you their legal guardian. A lot of people think that. It might make you their substitute decision maker if they're not competent, but they are competent. So you need to have a power of attorney for property and personal care so that you can take these notarial copies of this document and put them on the desk of whomever you think might not otherwise talk to you or listen to you, because that's just how it is. Kid turns 18, they don't go to CHIO anymore, they don't have a pediatrician, and you try to talk about accommodations at university and they won't discuss it with you, which is what motivated Karen to get her kids done. It's an obvious thing, but it's not obvious to you until you have a roadblock. That's what that's about. And see, Elena, my daughter tried to get a bursary or OSAP for taking the program, but she's unable to study full time. So she was told that her studies could be subsidized if she studies full time. Is that so? Well, it sounds pretty confusing to me. I don't see anything here that's in what we've been discussing that says that it has to be full time. But if you get the specifics and let me know, I'll try to give you an answer.
Yeah, I can answer that, Ken. OSAP is provided for part-time studies as well. So any student should be able to, and they can also get full-time OSAP with a reduced workload.
Right.
So they're considered as full-time students, but with a reduced workload, and that doesn't change them to part-time status. That's very important.
Makes sense to me. Here's Allison. Do you recommend contributing and then stopping, waiting the 10 years, this is RDSPs, and investing in another way, i.e. real estate? No, I don't. If you want to contribute and stop so that the vesting period for the grants and bonds is done, sure. I have clients whose kids have an anticipated shorter lifespan. Like kids with Rett syndrome, for example. And so you might judiciously decide to contribute for 5 years and then wait for 10 years until it's all vested. You could certainly do that. You could make a calculated decision. But in most scenarios, it's better to just make your contributions. The worst that happens is, God forbid, child dies you get your money back. Your contributions are paid back to his estate. And then as the parent, you, by succession law, you get the money. Yes, it's true that you lose the non-vested grants and bonds, but you get the growth. So unless you have a very clear situation, because I mean, they provide for you to be able to take money out without losing grants and bonds. If your child is anticipated, doctor states that it wouldn't be unusual for them to not live 5 more years. Well, you get a special situation, right? We just covered that on the previous slide. So if you think that investing in real estate is a good idea, which is probably a good idea, that's just perfectly fine. But with respect to the RDSPs, I would suggest that you continue contributing. And if you do decide at a certain point that you want to even keep contributing and investing, but stop the grants and bonds so that the vesting period starts to run, there is paperwork you complete for that year, terminating the grants and bonds. You have to terminate them, because otherwise, even if you contribute nothing, the child will get the bond, right? But there's a tick box for both of these. Stop the grants and bonds, it's over. And then if you wanted to continue to contribute and to invest, you could do that. That's not a problem. Can we add to past years where we did not contribute the 1,500, or are those years lost? No, you can pick them up over a 10-year period retroactively. There's an optimum formula for this. And the short story is that, for example, if you wanted to start to do pickup retro contributions, in the first year you would contribute 3,500, and the child would still get the bond of 1,000, but they would get the maximum grant allowed for that year of 10,500. So if you had a perfect situation where you're trying to pick up 10 years worth, because the child has just been approved retroactively for the disability tax credit, then there's a 5-year program where you contribute 3,500, and then the formula changes to 4,000 and then to 5,000 and so on. But over a 5-year period, you make contributions and you contribute for the year in which you contribute, those 5 years, plus 2 years retro for each one. So over a 5-year period, you contribute for those 5 years, plus you pick up the 10 in arrears. And at that point, you're even. And there's lots of situations where this comes into play. Let's go on to the next slide. So assessments, support for low-income families, keeping costs down, medical inductions. I believe, Monica, this is your slide. You're muted, Monica.
Sorry about that. I can speak to some of the assessments. So I'm not sure about the support for low-income families. I'm not aware of assessments that are covered for those families unless it's under ODSP and for a dependent. That's the only circumstance where I've seen that an assessment was covered for low-income families. I have had assessments covered by service agencies such as Service Coordination. If you're a client of Service Coordination, then they will cover assessments. But those are the only 2 circumstances where I've seen. And psychoeducational assessments versus workplace occupational assessments. So psychoeducational assessments are valid for high school. Once post-secondary comes into play, it's most likely just a psychological update so that the individual is assessed as an adult for the adult learning profile versus an adolescent one, because there's different tools that are used until the age of 16 and then post 16 for psychologists. And in university and in college and post-secondary, we don't have psychoeducational assessments. They're just psychological assessments which determine the accommodations that a student could benefit from. Workplace occupational assessments are done by an occupational therapist, and I strongly urge parents to invest in those. They're not terribly costly, but they are hugely valuable in helping to determine either for volunteer work or co-op placements or adapted workplace situations where they're supported. to know what types of workplace environments to avoid and what type of workplace environments are a good fit for the individual. Keeping costs down, I always recommend a number of funding sources for my clients, whether they're service agencies, service clubs in the community will often pay for assessments as well, or assist a family. There are some foundations that will assist as well, but perhaps not for assessments. And then the medical income tax deduction, actually, Ken, I was wondering if you could speak to that, because a number of my clients have asked that question, and that's not in my field of expertise. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that and how much of that is covered, if it can be covered, if the family doesn't have extended health benefits through work.
Could you state that again, please?
Can assessments and other medical expenses be deducted from income tax?
Well, if they're a medical expense, yes, in the same way any other medical expense can be. It has to be over a certain threshold value based upon 3% of your income. And then the savings, just to keep it all in perspective, all that you save is 15.5% of what you spent.
Right. Okay. Either way, they have to be paid for upfront. So
That's
for
right.
families that are on a low income, it's not terribly helpful.
Mhm.
And then the last point of transitioning to community programs after age 21, that is what I assist a lot of my clients with. Starting from the age of 16, we do a vision planning exercise for learning to 21 years, and then post 21 years for workplace, either moving into a group home or staying at home or community living. So those are assessments. For those are social work assessments, and those are done either through ODSP or privately through occupational therapists.
You know what we have found, I mean, you're always learning, right? What we have found in the recent past is that for the legal guardianship work that we do, this is for people that are not competent, that if there is family managed care funding, when the child reaches 18, then they have to have legal guardianship in order to continue with the funding, to receive the funding. But the local LIN that funds it, Health Network, they will fund up to $2,000 worth of assessments for the capacity assessments. Mm-hmm. So if a person happened to have family managed care funding, I would bet that you could get the LIN to pay for any of these other assessments as well, because it's all in the nature of understanding the situation and planning for care. So we haven't done that particular thing, but I think pretty sure that we could get the LIN to pay for some of these assessments if it was needed. Greg, would you mind saying a few short words about the RESPs and the Canada Learning Bond? I'm thinking about families where there's a grandparent, a parent, they have a child, an adult child, a mother, let's say, who is on ODSP and who has a child, their grandchild, who has no disabilities, and they want to set up an RESP in the name of their child, the child with disabilities or special needs, who is obviously, household income is low because they're on ODSP, and they want to set up an RESP for they want the mother to set up an RESP for the grandchild. Could you speak to what the Canada Learning Bond does, Greg?
Sure, I can. Basically, the Canada Learning Bond is one of these benefits that is approved by Canada Revenue. So anyone can apply for the Canada Learning Bond under the RESP designation. And if they qualify due to their income and whoever is the parent and their income status, who is the primary caregiver, then the government will decide if they qualify given the conditions you just gave. So it's always a good idea to apply for that. You've got nothing to lose.
There's a good comment here, not so much a question as a comment from an anonymous person, and I've seen this this information before. So you're a student, you apply for OSAP, you have some disabilities, you accumulate some student loans, and then of course the fact that you've finished the post-secondary education of whatever type you've been involved in, perhaps then you can't get employment. So the comment here from the anonymous person is good. They recite it much better than I could. With OSAP, after I had graduated and I was not able to work full-time because of my disability, I used repayment assistance, because of course you can always get a break, a spell out on the payments, right? I used repayment assistance, but there's apparently 2 non-advertised programs for people with disabilities. One was repayment by the government over 10 years, and the other immediate, but the immediate forgiveness was meant no more loans for life. This is going to be mentioned for viewers' information. I used the 10-year period, but was able to get loans in the future because of the net cost to me was the same as long as I stayed on top of the 4-month reapplications. And that's what you have to do. You have to reapply for this waiver every 6 months. Also, the fact that these programs existed was luck. An agent realized I had a disability and told me. I didn't find out for over 10 years after I graduated. Also, repayment assistance works for anyone who is not earning above minimum wage full-time, needs to be renewed every 6 months, that's true. You can continue to renew. Now it can drag on for many, many years, but any student can do that, frankly, if they don't have employment or low income employment and they can't afford to pay. Let's see now. I open an RDSP account on behalf of my son. Will the bank typically assist with any bonds or grant paperwork? Well, what happens is you do open it with the bank in a sense that they are providing this RDSP vehicle. But normally you don't actually just do it through the bank branch. You have to contact a back office that deals specifically with these. And then Service Canada and the bank coordinates with CRA, and you automatically get the bond even if you make if the child makes no contribution, presuming they're 18 and over, and they automatically contribute $3,500 grant if you contribute $1,500, so long as you file the child's tax return. So we have scenarios where a client contacts us, they can't figure out why the child's not getting his grants and bonds. It's because they haven't filed his taxes for 3 years. So we do it. We do that sort of thing as well. Let's see what else we've got here. And then we're getting close to 7 or 8 rather. Where did that go? What happened to that? I think, Karen, I think you must have answered that last question about the retroactive tax credits because it's disappeared. Oh no, here it is again. So Holly, is anyone familiar with dealing with the government on getting previous 10-year reevaluations and reimbursed to a parent once the diagnosis is confirmed and Revenue Canada recognizes it? We have been waiting since March for our reassessments. Well, I can tell you that you'll have to reapply because anything that was done prior to March or since before April is just gone into the bucket unless it was done online. We do a lot of tax credit work, getting people approved for the disability tax credit or the caregiver tax credit, and doing a 10-year back filing. The 10-year back filing for an adult child is about 16 grand, and the caregiver credit for someone who's 28 back to their age 18 for the parent caregiver is about $8,000. So we do that all the time. But of course, our stuff's all online. And I can tell you that if you did it by paperwork in March, it's probably vaporized because they just didn't keep it on track. They just couldn't handle it. If you would like assistance, let me know.
Ken, I have a question from one of our clients. And again, just same thing happened. It just disappeared. She just wants to know if she said RDSP, but I'm presuming she means RESP, if it can be used for life skills at a community college instead of like an actual program.
The RESP?
She said RDSP, but I'm presuming by her question she means RESP.
Well, I would think that a program of that sort could certainly be fashioned if it's not already offered. I know that you can get whatever you want put together. It's simplest, of course, if you have a small cadre of kids, similar kids, and you go to Algonquin or some other college and say, look, I've got 6 or 12 students here. We want a program like this. We're prepared to pay for it. We have RESPs. Would you mind putting this together for summer for 3 consecutive weeks with 10 hours a week? Well, obviously you could do that. So if I understand, well, once a child is over 18, we need to get legal guardianship instead of power of attorney, and for this, an assessment needs to be done. Well, Helen, if the child is competent, you just need to do a power of attorney. If they're not competent, well, then we should have a discussion, because you're probably just fine right now. You could be the ODSP trustee, you can be the account holder on the RDSP. You are, in fact, the substitute decision maker for healthcare, although you may not get the clout that you really should get at the hospitals. So you're fine right now. What happens, though, as you age, and you will, one day what happens is you're gone, and then who takes over? What's the succession plan? And whoever that successor is, for example, the trustee of your Henson Trust, right? It's a sibling of your child, perhaps. Well, they could probably arrange to be the ODSP trustee. That's probably true. But they can't be at present an account holder on the RDSP. And we've just described how large this can be. It could be 700,000 at age 60. So the payments from the RDSP are paid to and only to the beneficiary, which is the child. So you get these checks for 30,000 a year issued to the name of the child who's not competent. So, and we never try to sell guardianships at all. And whenever there's any kind of gray area, we rely upon the fact that people are deemed to be competent. So when it's appropriate, it's much cheaper, and if it's effective, to simply have the child sign, make his mark on the power of attorney for property and personal care. Karen does a lot of those involved with our benefit increases. ODSP benefit increases from $896 to $1169. And it's a lot of times a lot simpler if we have you have the child's power of attorney. The problem with the legal guardianship is that at some point, even if there is an outstanding power of attorney and you're gone and your daughter takes her brother to a bank or wherever, and she wants to become the account holder, they won't do it. And then who is it that's going to manage the investments? Who's going to receive the money? When the child turns 65, who's going to apply for old age security and guaranteed income supplements? And who's going to have standing to deal with the group home? Because, group homes are an entity unto themselves. There's no question that you have issues here with a certain number of group homes. You're always a little bit at risk, and every parent knows that. Well, the parent may be right on top of things and know who to call and who to jump on. But does your daughter? And will they listen? We're applying for legal guardianship for a couple of brothers. The father, my client, died a little while back. The brothers are, one turned 60 this year and one is slightly younger. So a cousin is applying to become their legal guardian, and they're in a community living residence. And the community living philosophy is that you should simply assist people to make decisions. Now, that's your philosophy. My philosophy is to take the best care of the child that can be taken care of, and to see that their needs are met, and that people that might otherwise mislead or neglect or abuse them are put in their place and taken out of the picture. That's my job, and that's the parent's job. Well, if you're not a legal representative, you have no standing. You're just a cousin. who's complaining about something, and then they exclude you from the residence because you're trespassing, right? So, but if you are the legal guardian, you stand in the shoes of your cousins. So what's happened is Community Living, in this case, has arranged to have the brothers spoken to and discussed with a lawyer and another social worker of some sort, so they can decide whether to allow themselves to be assessed. Meanwhile, the one boy is turning 60, and a decision has to be made before the end of the year on how he will receive his RDSP funding. And in 5 years, somebody's going to have to apply for OAS and GIS for him. And when that happens, when ODSP ceases and is no longer simply paid to Community Living, which gets a free ride because the money is paid directly to them, and they get that money plus core funding for these kids, these guys who are 60 and slightly less, not kids anymore. Well, who's going to take care of those guys? Who's going to see that as they age and having a lower, they're cognitively, they have developmental delays, they're going to encounter dementia at a much younger age. If you have a child with Down syndrome who's 55, he could well have dementia right now. Well, who's going to stand up for him? The legal guardian will stand up for him. So the whole idea that, they should, help them make decisions about their $30,000 a year when a paid caregiver is helping to influence the decisions made by a not competent person, this is clearly inappropriate. That's why they can't be legal guardians, because they are paid caregivers. They're not arm's length. So that's my rant for tonight. I do that every so often when I do these things. Let's see what else we've got here. It's 5 after 7. There's how you contact us. The email should in fact be, Karen, would you have this fixed? It should be karen@kpopelaw.ca. There's Monica's website. You can contact her or call her. If you have questions about RESPs that you'd like me to direct to Greg, I'll be happy to do that. And Greg and Monica and Karen, if you'd be kind enough, if you just look for the next 5 minutes at these questions and see whether there's anything there that you think you could answer. We'll just try to answer a few more questions for people, and then we'll ring off and say good night. Could you reiterate how OSAP works with ODSP? Well, you get both, but OSAP can have a shelter component, would have. And if you receive the shelter component for OSAP, and you also receive the shelter component of ODSP, if they are receiving the 1169, which has a 497 shelter component, then there can be a conflict between these two shelter components if the shelter amount, the cost of shelter, is less than the two added together. We have the rare situation where this fact situation comes together. Child goes to school, 3 years later, they're done, 4 years, it's more likely 4 years these days. A BA used to be 3 years, now it's 4. And it comes to ODSP's attention in some way that they've received both shelter from ODSP and from OSAP. And so you wind up with a 4-year overpayment, which needs to be paid back. It's properly paid back. And what happens is ODSP puts an overpayment amount on the monthly stub. Let's say it's $4,000, let's say. But what they do is they claw back $50 a month until that total of $4,000 is recovered. That's the worst part of it.
Ken, there's going to be some questions that we're not getting to. I've answered over 50 of them tonight.
All right.
Yeah, if they send me an email, Karen@kpopelaw, I will send them the family details and I'll try to answer them the best I can that way.
Okay. I see one here. Should everyone apply for BSWD and CSG? Where'd that go, Christ?
Just answered it, Ken.
Where did it go? Oh, did you answer it?
I did answer it,
Okay,
yes.
so it's gone. You've answered that. That's good. Thanks. Okay, there's a question. Please let me know if my son is working part-time, his annual income is more than 14,000, and we contribute 1,500 annually. How much would the government contribute? Well, the grant, it's based on his income, right? And the bond portion, the $1,000 bond portion, is not lost until his income is 34,000. The grant portion would not be lost until his income is 94,000. So you can see that even household income that is less than 94,000 when the child's under 18, they would still get the 3,500. They just wouldn't get the $1,000 bond. Can the power of attorney take over my role of the RDSP for my son when I'm gone? Yes. Will you send the slides? Yes, everyone who registered, and there were 434, I think, that registered, will receive the link for the video as well as the slide pack. If my child was listed as having some income from a family business while he was a teenager, does that influence when I should open an RDSP account? Well, normally I advise that you wait till he's 18. You could do it sooner, but it's just as I've said. If the reported income is 34,000 or greater, he loses the $1,000 bond for that year. Now, of course, you'll pick it all up later, which is why I usually advise people to just wait until the child is 18 before they make any substantial contributions. Because in most cases, a household income of greater than 94,000, the most you get is if you put in 1,000, you get 1,000, which is, great, right? 100% grant, that's absolutely great, right? But my experience is that if the child is young, that the parents have a need for those $1,000 generally. So I usually advise that they just open one up, get on the mailing list, then wait till the child's 18, and then start to contribute. And over the next 20 years, they'll get all the grants and bonds. It just won't have been received earlier and compound earlier. It's almost 7:15. Does anybody else see a question that they want to answer?
I'm just doing one now, Ken.
Okay. If we're setting up an RDSP for a son now and wanting to benefit from the 10 years retroactive grants, can we only contribute $3,500 for the first year, or can we put in more? You can put in more, but you won't get more grants. The maximum grant is $10,500. You can get that grant, picking up a full 10 years if you wish, over a 5-year period. But if you put in more than the $3,500 or the second year $4,000, it's a different formula slightly every year. You can contribute it, you're welcome to, because you've got $170,000 of excess room that you could contribute to, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But you won't get any more grants and bonds if that's your intent is to optimize the grants and bonds. Does the child get a bond of $1,000 every year, as well as $4,500 from the government? What they get is a $1,000 bond plus a $3,500 grant in return for a $1,500 contribution. Amanda, I didn't hear the answer to my question, the 16-year-old. Let's just see if I can find it.
Ken, is there any way to see previous questions and answers from the same person?
Well, I'm scrolling up. I can't see anything yet.
Okay.
Here's one from Parsa. Hi, Parsa. What if the person with a disability works part-time and makes more than 14? How much does one contribute? Well, if they're over 18 and they work part-time and they make 14,000, as long as they don't make more than 34,000, you contribute 1,500 and you get 3,500. I'm sorry, Amanda, I don't see your previous question. So it's 7:15 by my clock, 8:14 rather by my clock. And I think that's the end of this discussion. I hope everyone had some questions answered. I hope you learned a fair bit. I hope you found it interesting. As I say, you can address further questions. And we do webcasts like this pretty well every month, sometimes more frequently, but generally every month. We have a mailing list of over 11,000 people, and we send out monthly email blasts about different things. And we're always happy to see if we can provide a bit of advice, assist people. I believe the next one that we're doing, aside from a small one we're doing for a private group, is our annual update. And I believe it is early December. The annual update is early December. And as you can see, it's an annual update. And what it'll touch on is all the stuff that have changed since last year and has not changed, and a few new items, such as the caregiver benefit and so on. And we'll discuss the whole gamut of what we do. ODSP applications, benefit increases, disability and caregiver tax credits, wills and ends and trusts, legal guardianship, inter vivos trusts, whatever else we do. And we'd be happy to see you there if you'd like to take part. It's interesting, I'll shut up in about 1 minute. It's interesting that only a limited number of people, like about a quarter of the people on the list, take part in webcasts. And many people take part multiple times, each time, often. But many people do not ever take part in webcasts. We have the names and so on. We know exactly what's going on. So we've started a podcast program. There's a podcast link on my website, and you can search Ken Pope or Henson Trusts in whatever podcast channel that you use, because we're hoping that some people would prefer to listen and learn while driving or whatever, but just won't take part in webcasts, and that is absolutely true. We know that is true. And so we now have this podcast channel, so you can get a lot of this information from all of the past videos and webcasts in an audio version. So if you'd like to take part, just visit kpopelaw.com and go to the podcast link. And that being said, I'd like to thank Greg and Monica and Karen for their contributions and kind assistance. And I'm now going to close off the event. I hope everyone has a good night.
Good night.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Ken.